Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott. And a week ago, I basically made a challenge saying if you're upset about what's happening to the country and you're looking at a guy who's laying $34 billion on the table, you might want to think about contributing $10 so we can do something to fight that. And the response has been really very, very, very impressive. Something like 600 new members just in the last week and a large number of people making individual donations. I think that was probably 10% of the audience responding, and that is an enormously large number, to be perfectly honest with you. We'd still like to hear from the rest of you, but nevertheless, we are exceedingly grateful for those of you that made donations, those of you that became members. And I think in these days coming, we're going to want that sense of community and that sense of belonging, because one of the things that is being deployed so effectively against us is the sense that we are the very last people who believe any of these outdated, crazy dinosaur ideas. And the fellowship at the membership at BillWhittle.com is a big bonus, and it's one of the things we're most proud of. So I wanted to deal with this episode to talk about what we're going to be doing going forward. The election is still under. The election is an open election and will be until the court cases are resolved. So whatever happens in that regard, I think one of the things that we can tell now is that the flow of information is so deeply under control of people who are not only not our friends, but not friends of freedom in any way whatsoever. People who are determined that if they have to overlook a news story in order for their candidate to win, then they will violate whatever ethics or principles they might have had in their profession. People who are utterly convinced that even though they're just in their late teens or late 20s rather, or early 30s, they know more about what's good for everybody than everybody else does, and they're determined that you're going to see what they want you to see, and so on and so on and so on. So what are we going to do to get ourselves out of this morass that we find ourselves in? Steve, we've talked about this before, but needless to say, at the time, when we all met, we all had our own little blogs and we had a little bit of traffic, and then along comes Facebook and YouTube. And now not only can we do videos, but with Facebook, we can accumulate people and get friends and get more people seen. And sure enough, that worked. This was private property. We're not going to hack through all this again. We've been through this 100 times. It's a critical mistake to put all of our means of communication in the hands of private businesses that are not friendly to the idea of freedom of speech. And if Twitter can block the president of the United States from speaking in mid-sentence, and if the news organizations can cut away from him in mid-sentence, we got a situation that we're going to have to deal with. So we're already talking about making the transition to other sites. We've talked about this before, MeWe and perhaps
Parler.
Was it Parker?
Parler, yeah.
Yeah. And all of this is great, but we simply can't just move over there. We have to take the people that we have watching us here on YouTube and bring them over. People watching us on Facebook, they're going to have to come over. We're going to start doing that beginning really next week in earnest. But what do you do about this, Steve? How do you handle this kind of thing? You really are talking about having to move your entire house into another house, all of your stuff. And at the same time, you kind of have to keep the old house open long enough for people to be able to show up late and find out where the hell you moved to.
Yeah, my wife and I bought this house in 2006, and it took us a couple, 3 months to get the old house ready for sale. And by then, the bottom was dropping out of the housing market, as you recall, a little financial crisis that began early 2007, right? We were putting that house on the market, and there we were. Got a new mortgage on a bigger place, still paying the old mortgage on the old place, and that's an uncomfortable feeling. I got to tell you, that leads to some sleepless nights. The difference is, in that case, is we owned both properties. You know, we had a lot of equity in the old property. The worst thing that could happen is if we stopped making the payments and they foreclosed, we'd still get a lot of the money back out of that thing. When you put a bunch of your business in somebody else's property, like Facebook or Twitter, you never develop any equity. Everything you have there.
What a great point that is.
Thank you. Everything you have there is subject to their whim. And that is a very precarious place to be. I know some old school bloggers who shut down their blogs to move to Facebook back in the day, and,
we all did.
And now they're being squelched. One of the best things you own, Bill, is not your Star Trek memorabilia, although I am jealous of some of it, but rather it is BillWhittle.com. You've had that property for a long time. It's got some equity in it, and it's not subject to algorithms at Facebook or at Twitter and any of the rest. My friend and colleague over at PJ Media, Stephen Cruiser, he reminded me of something that I'd completely forgotten about. It was the right. It was conservatives who really got Twitter off the ground back in the day. I signed up for my account pretty early in the process, 2007 or 2008, and I think Twitter launched in 2006 or 7. But it was the nascent days of the Tea Party, where conservatives who'd taken up what was then known as microblogging on Twitter would get together in direct messages with one another to put together these Tea Party rallies back in 2009. And it was that community that really got Twitter first noticed. And here we are, not that many years later, really, when a Republican president can't even say what he wants to say on this particular platform. I had really high hopes that with a Trump re-election that we could reform Section 230 of the CDA.
You betcha that is the biggest catastrophic outcome of this election if it goes the other way.
Yeah, if it goes the other way. As I said on another segment, I'm not conceding until Trump concedes. Full stop. Just not doing it. Section 230 lets these giant powerhouses act as content distribution channels and as publishers at the same time, and they've got to be made. They've got to be made to choose. And I will tell you right now, it is the Republican threat to reform Section 230 that is why they put not their thumb on the scale. They didn't put their thumbs on the scale of this election. They
jumped on it.
Yeah, these are the 900-pound gorillas of social media, and they put their big fat asses on the scale. Both sites did, Facebook and Twitter. We've got to win this thing. I don't want to shut these guys down, but they have to be brought to heel. And I don't mean by the right. I don't mean they need to do what we tell them to do. But I mean, if they're going to act as huge platforms for everybody, then they have to act as huge platforms for everybody.
That would be lovely in a world where law and reason ruled, but that's not the world we live in anymore. The enormous influence of big tech is what basically put Joe Biden over the top, if he is in fact over the top. The suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story and everything connected to that, and all of the corruption, all of the Chinese connections, all of that being buried is them going all in. And the problem is that the Justice Department is run by the Attorney General, and the Attorney General is appointed by the President of the United States. And if the President of the United States has just gotten himself elected through the efforts of big tech, it doesn't seem terribly likely to me that he's going to be breaking them up. And as a matter of fact, given the success they have in molding opinion, I imagine he's going to let them get much, much stronger. Scott, Steve said something I thought was really fascinating, that line about, well, we don't have any equity in these companies, but in fact we do. The equity that we have in the companies are the eyeballs that we have in the company. The eyeballs are worth money to Facebook because they run ads on those pages. So to the degree that if you could migrate half of America's eyeballs off of Facebook, that would hurt them financially. I don't think it would hurt them enough to make them change, but it would hurt them. And I'm in the mood to hurt them, to be honest with you. I'm tired of being subjected to their oversight and their decision that this has to be fact checked because some 22-year-old with a nose ring has decided that they don't think I know what I'm talking about, and therefore all of the communication is going to be shut off. So we do have equity, and the equity is the people that follow us on Facebook and the subscribers that we have right now on YouTube. If we could move those people over to another platform, one that might actually just share the ideas just because you asked to be shared them with, I'd like to subscribe to that. Well, in that case, then we'll send you the content. Someplace like that. Do you think that's enough to, you know what? I was about to ask you, do you think that's enough to make Facebook change? I don't care. Number one, I don't think it is. And number two, I don't care. They're not going to change. They're just not going to change. So they need to be abandoned. and they need to be abandoned and replaced with something that is at least marginally more American and fundamentally democratic in the good sense of the word, and not so blue streak totalitarian.
Yeah, and I think that most of us would agree that there's something sort of un-American about complaining about someone else who's been very successful at doing something and won't do it the way we want them to do it. I mean, these people have built businesses that we disagree with how they're conducting their businesses, but they've been very successful by attracting huge audiences, lots of eyeballs. They've become habit knit into everybody's lives. I was just thinking as you were talking about YouTube, and I thought, gee, I wonder what the trending videos are on YouTube. And maybe this is our problem, because as I scanned through the beginning first, 20 of the top trending videos of the last 24 hours, only one of them is even remotely political, and that's a sketch on Saturday Night Live. That happens to have 12 million views from 2 days ago, when it was posted, and it's in the top 20. The number one video, or the number one on the trending list, not necessarily in view count here, is a UFC golf battle staged by Dude Perfect. Now, if you haven't seen a Dude Perfect video, you're really missing some of the sweet marrow of life. But in any case, and then there's a video here that's had 400 and almost 20,000 views of somebody saying it's Jeopardy posting "Thank you for everything" to Alex Trebek, who just passed away. And then there's some guy, I don't even know what this is, official video. It's like a music video. And there's some cartoon videos. And there's some skateboarding with Tony Hawk and behind the scenes of my leopard collection video shoot. I have no idea what these things mean. But these are the videos that are getting massive views, and none of them, as I scroll through, I can't see a single one that looks like it has anything other than that Saturday Night Live clip. Oh, here we go. Down at about number 30, live stream of President-elect Joe Biden addressing the nation. So that's the closest thing you have at 3.7 million views from 2 days ago. I wonder if our problem is really more about what do we expect of that platform and what kind of content are we producing. The real market there is for younger people who are not necessarily interested in long talks about significant ideas, but are more interested in entertainment, how to apply makeup and how to unbox the latest technological marvel or box of kittens. Yes, move your political talk to Parler or Rumble or MeWe or whatever the latest incarnation of the thing that everybody's going to be doing really soon that never turns out that way. But I think there's more to this than that. And maybe more of us need to just start doing videos that aren't explicitly political, because it's really people, we don't need to have a point to attract people, or 3 points in a poem in a PowerPoint presentation. We need to have a life. We need to be interesting. We need to be entertaining. We need to be funny. We need to be passionate. We need to be inspiring. We need to find ways to connect with people's everyday lives. Most people aren't going out of their ways to say, gee, I wonder if anybody's having a political conversation I can get in on. They're more interested in something that will pull them out of the stress of the constant warfare in their own lives, in their own families, and in their own country.
That's something else we're going to be doing with not only the support we got during the last week, but the support that's going to continue to come in, because I think all of you watching understand the danger that we're in now, and the genuinely serious moment that we're in, because they're as we saw with the Biden laptop thing, and then as we saw with Twitter blocking Donald Trump's tweets after the president, a CEO of Twitter, Trevor Bin Laden, had sworn under oath that they do not interfere with an election. So if he swears under oath to Ted Cruz and others that they do not interfere with an election, and the first thing that happens the next day is that they interfere with the election, that tells me that this guy's got a pretty good feeling that there's not going to be any consequences for this, because that would have to be prosecuted by the Department of Justice, and so on and so on and so on. So how do we beat these people? They're smart people, but they're not as smart as they think they are, and that's their problem. They think they're smarter than everybody. Now, I don't think I'm smarter than everybody, but I think everybody is smarter than they are. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So a number of things are going to be going on. Those of you who've been watching for a long time, especially Stratosphere Lounge, have known that I've been dabbling around in all kinds of science fiction, computer graphics and stuff. And the reason I do that is because if you draw a pie chart of views, and the number of viewers who are watching for video game items is something like 98 or 99% compared to 1 or 2% of people who are watching political videos. We're spending all of our efforts and all of our time in that 1% of the pie slice, along with everybody else, by the way, when 99% of that is completely open and available, as Scott pointed out. This kind of thing appears frivolous to some people. I know it appears frivolous to some of our members, and it appears frivolous to some people who thinks that, no, we should be right on the nose with the political issues. We're certainly going to continue to do those. But it's not just a question of messaging. It's a question of audience. It is more important to reach people who are young with ideas that they want to watch. And all I can tell you is I remember at one of my speaking events, somebody said, and they meant it as a compliment, I certainly took it that way. But after the session, they said, you know what we all ought to do, speaking to other members of the audience, they said, we ought to make it so that if you watch a Bill Whittle video, your kid gets $5 allowance, and if they don't, then they don't. And my first response to that is, well, they won't take the $5. They'd rather lose the $5 than watch the video. And that's just reality. The trick is, how do you make a video that points out political issues without telling them, rather by showing them? And how do you do it in such a way that you're no longer buying them and sitting them there with the Clockwork Orange things, so that they get their political message? How do you do it in such a way that they are emailing you and asking you when the next episode is going to drop? That's the trick. And I think I know how to do that trick. I genuinely do. The resources that we've gained in the last week have been really very encouraging. And we would ask you to continue. Not those of you who've already stepped up. We are enormously grateful to you. But the more resources we have, the more we can do this kind of content, and the more we can do the kind of content that doesn't look like political content, because it really isn't political content. It is showing people how moral people behave in exciting situations when lasers are firing and spaceships are blowing up and sexy robots are dancing in space cabarets in cyber towns and all the rest of this eye candy. We either get into this fight or we don't, but we've certainly made an enormous first step in this direction. And because of that, we'd love to ask you to continue to do so. If you weren't one of those people who helped us out, we gained 600 members. These people now have a home, and they have 600 people who have families they didn't know they didn't have before. It's going to become more important as the days go by. So please keep it up. And we're very grateful for those of you that did come by. And we expect in the weeks to come, certainly after we get into the new year, to be able to show off some of these things that we feel very confident about, and that we might ask you to help us support too. Until then, I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott. This is Your Right Angle. We'll see you next week right here on YouTube.